Welcome to the presentation SCHD versus individual dividend growth companies. Hi, I'm Skip Kapoor and my channel is Passive Income from Equities. So to set the stage, during my working years, I was primarily investing in S&P 500 type index products in my 401k and IRA and buying individual dividend growth companies in my taxable accounts. Then when I retired, I needed to generate income to live on, and I went 100% dividend growth. Then along the way came covered call products and other better strategies than pure dividend growth. It's a style of investing that I call enhanced equity income, of which dividend growth and covered call strategies are two of six tranches. So when I was looking at dividend growth, I came to the realization that SCHD was quite frankly better than holding individual dividend growth companies. And that's what I'm going to walk you through, the process I went through, the logic I used. And I've gone from 100% dividend growth companies to where it's less than 10% today. Before I go into this topic that I introduced in the previous slide, if you want to know a tremendous amount of detail about SCHD and how it works, go into YouTube and enter Getting to Know SCHD. And when you see the presentation from my channel, Passive Income Investing, click on that and you'll see the longer, much more detailed version on how SCHD works. Before I get into the one and only comparison slide, which follows next, this is the only SCHD related slide I will share with you. I wanted you to get a sense for the composition of SCHD. So it basically has 10 of the 11 sectors because it excludes REITs. So the dividends are qualified. And the ETF is comprised of 100 companies. So there's adequate diversification. The largest holdings are capped at 4%. Sector holdings are capped at 25%. So in financials, the largest holdings are BlackRock in US Bancorp. In healthcare, there are four holdings: Amgen, AbbVie, Pfizer, Bristol Myers Squibb. In consumer defensive, you have Coke, Pepsi, Altria. In industrials, you have Lockheed Martin and United Postal Service. In energy, the largest holding is Chevron. In consumer cyclical, you have Home Depot. In technology, you have Texas Instruments and Cisco. In communication, you have Verizon. In basic materials, you have Lyndall Basel, the chemical company. In utilities, the company I had never heard of called the symbol CWENA, Clearway. It's a green energy type of company. So I just wanted you to get a sense very quickly for how diversified it is and the quality of the holdings, which I think you'll agree comprise of rather high quality, um, effective and efficient companies. Now for the comparison that over time convinced me to move my dividend growth component from individual companies to SCHD. So what I'm going to do is compare it to dividend growth companies that I have owned or own, and companies that are quite frankly very popular in the dividend growth income community, the DGI community. So since inception, SCHD has given a total return of 344%. The yield as of July 6th was 3.68%, and the ending value of a $10,000 investment at inception would have been $44,000. So I'm just going to go rather quickly so that you get a sense for how it compares to holdings that I have. I either own them or have owned them. Procter & Gamble is actually, SCHD has outperformed, as you can see. Coke, it has outperformed massively, and Coke is a rather large holding, so it's kind of disappointing when I see this comparison. Pepsi, which I also own, SCHD has outperformed. Altria, SCHD has outperformed. LMT has significantly outperformed SCHD. I also own it. Verizon has been a very dismal runner-up to SCHD. Johnson & Johnson, a kind of a proud member of most DGI portfolios, has been outperformed by SCHD. ADP, which I own, has outperformed SCHD. BlackRock, which I own, has outperformed SCHD. And so now let's take a look at how many of these have beaten SCHD in both current yield and total return. And one of the things you'll find is that there isn't a single company that has done both. There are companies that have beaten SCHD in total return, and there is at least one, Altria, which has beaten, and Verizon obviously, which have beaten SCHD in yield, but have been distant seconds when it comes to total return. So the point is that there is not a single company here that has a higher yield and a higher total return. You get one or the other. Whereas with SCHD, you get a reasonable yield while having a reasonable total return. I wanted to give examples of other holdings that I either have or have owned, which have massively outperformed SCHD. So on the positive side were companies like Microsoft, Visa, and MasterCard. On the negative side, and that's the point I want to make, is that the negatives can be a tremendous drag on performance. 3M, IBM, General Electric. I used to own a slew of tobacco companies and REITs. The REITs I would cap at about 7.5% of my portfolio. But for the most part, they either treaded water and all I got was dividends, or losses, as in the case of GE, IBM, or very modest gains, as in the case of 3M. So the point is that you can, what I'm trying to show with this table is that you can own an ETF with 100 holdings, have diversification, and quite frankly beat most of the most popular dividend growth companies in the market. So here's the bottom line. A case can definitely be made for owning SCHD over holding individual dividend growth companies. So here are some of the reasons that I've given to myself. One is it's more than an acceptable yield at about 3.68% as of July 6th, 2024. It has an excellent record of dividend growth. It's 11% annualized over the last 10 years and has increased every year since inception. It's literally maybe one of the few, if only, dividend growth ETF to have done so. The most recent distribution at 82 cents was its largest ever. It's diversified, obviously. It has the discipline of an index. There's not much to be done, right? So when it had IBM at one time, and it dropped out because it didn't meet the criteria, and it dropped out because of the annual reconstitution, which is done in a coldly efficient computerized manner. The quality balancing scrapes pennies because they sell expensive and buy cheap, and it all leads to a very acceptable total return of 12.47% per year. It's behind, it lags the S&P 500. I don't think anything can beat the S&P 500. The longer the period, the less the chance of beating the S&P 500. But if you look at it in purely total return terms, 12.4% is very, very good in terms of both returns and its effects on compounding. It's a cheap fund at only 6 basis points. It is available for options, puts and calls. It's highly liquid. I usually, when it's at the high end of its 52-week high, I sell way out of the money call options to scrape extra income. And when I buy, I almost always buy it using cash secured puts at the cheapest cost possible. Bottom line is much more efficient use of time, less effort. And lastly, when you hold SCHD, it's much less likely that you will suffer catastrophic or permanent losses, right? So I'll just use IBM as an example, which was both a holding of SCHD and I held it for 8 years. All I got was a yield in the range of 3.5 to 5% per year. And I ended up probably losing about between 10 to 12% of my capital. So it was a pretty bad misallocation of capital on my part. And even though it was part of SCHD, it went in and out and automatically, and it got SCHD got the results that I'm walking you through on this page. So in my case, I feel very comfortable with SCHD being in the 15 to 17.5% of my entire portfolio. I probably would not recommend over 15% for anybody regardless of their strategy.